Welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. I'm your host today, Bill Hirschman. I'm the chief critic and editor for Florida Theater on Stage.com, an online journalism arts website. And our topic today has a lot to do with how to build the next generation of theater goers. And one of the key building blocks towards that goal is children's theater. We have our usual gang of commentators here, starting with a Renaissance man, Michael McKeever, who is a director, playwright, actor, set designer, and general dog's body, which I've never understood what that word means. Next to him is Karen Stevens, the noted actress and writer and educator. And over here next to me is Iris Acker, even more noted, producer, actress, writer, teacher, and many, many other titles. But we're honored today, even more so, to have as our guest Stephanie Ansin. Stephanie is the founder and artistic director of the Miami Theater Center in Miami Shores. MTC is probably better known to many of you under its earlier incarnation, the Playground Theater, a nationally known children's theater with a reputation for lush productions and imaginative design. So I want to start by asking Stephanie, you and I have spoken before about how you believe that children's theater should be far more than just a stuffed teddy bear doll dancing across a stage in a spotlight. That you need children's theater that employs imagination in appealing to the audiences, even of first graders, intelligence and ability to deal with serious issues. Would you discuss that vision a little bit more, what you're trying to do that you think others can learn from?
You said it very well. Don't dumb it down. And the kids are more intelligent than the parents most of the time, more perceptive, more engaged, their attention span is better. They get it, and they're not gonna lie. They're not going to fall asleep and then stand up and give you a standing ovation at the end just because they read about it in the New York Times or Florida Theater Online that they should. Their reactions are honest, and so we try to communicate honestly with every audience member, including someone in a one-digit age bracket.
How do you do that? How do you reach those people in a different way?
My collaborators and I don't think we do anything differently. We have an intention in back of our head. We don't want to put extra violence or sexual material on stage for a younger audience, but beyond that, it's not a conscious adjustment that we make.
But
it's like having a conversation with one of you. I might think of a few things I want to do, but not really. If I'm really in a dialogue with you or a dialogue with the audience, using a conversation as a metaphor, I have my intention, but we don't have a checklist.
When you're looking at the new projects, the new plays that you're going to put on stage, what are the criteria that you think of that you think is going to engage a young audience?
I'm the first audience member, so I have to be engaged. And what I look for is a story or seeds for a story that I can develop, that I see visual opportunities, a good story, characters, roles for the actors. We always imagine specific actors that we know, even if it doesn't work out that way. We have actors in our minds. Oh, this would be a great role for this person. Stage metaphor, something that we can put our imagination into, that it's not on the page, okay, that's how it's going to be.
Well, along the same lines of that, your productions are spectacular, and the sets and the costumes are just so glorious. Could you touch base on that? And obviously that's one of the things that grabs a young audience, but could you talk a little bit about the process of how you and your Imagineers get together and start creating these?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk specifically.
Please.
One show, The Red Thread, that has been in our repertoire since 2010-11, that season. So my collaborator, Fernando Calzadilla, he and I research and write together, and then he designs sets, costumes, and lights, and I direct. So it's a very holistic process. We're so fortunate. We're sitting in the same room. I'm writing dialogue, and he comes to an obstacle in the set design or costume design, and we can change the dialogue to support a solution.
That's
and
wonderful.
vice versa. It's really a luxury.
So the design elements inform the script as well as the script informing the design elements.
Yes, because we're constantly talking about how, and actually that project came about because we were reading fairy tales and folk tales from around the world, and I was very tired, and I happened to be sleeping, like napping on the couch, and he was reading a fairy tale, folk tale from China, and it was about a female weaver and her 3 sons, which we ended up changing to a father, making the weaver the father and 3 daughters. But there were 2 or 3 moments in that story that I woke up. And that was when the son put his teeth into the stone horse and the stone horse turned into a flying horse. And when the weaver's tapestry from his dream that he spent years, well, she in the original story spent years creating this tapestry, and then the tapestry came to life, and her whole family was transported to the world in the tapestry. So those 2 moments, I woke up and I said, okay, we have to, I don't know how, but that's the show. That's the story.
You're in a unique position because the children are busted. And once they're there,
Tuesday
they
through
love
Friday,
it.
right?
Of course, it's getting out of school. That's, we're going to, but once they get there, the magic begins. But to get the audience in, don't you have to educate the parents to bring them on the Saturdays when the children, are not being bused there, but brought by their parents?
I think that's what we're doing now. We're creating the parents of the future.
That's great.
Because people don't go to shows, go to the theater, go to any arts unless they started as children, usually. I mean, I'm
Exactly.
sure there are some adult converts. I wonder if I was thinking, is it like religion, like you don't go to church or temple or something as an adult? There are people who come to it as an adult, but maybe more often it's because it's a habit or an
Absolutely.
appetite that starts as a child.
Right.
And you might go away from
Exactly.
it, but then come back when you're older and have your own kids. That happens to people with religion too. They ignore it for a while, but then when they have their family, they feel like it's a value they want to support for their family or for a more fulfilled life. I was thinking about that as the holidays were passing through.
But I think it's completely valid, and the earlier they become exposed to it, the earlier the chances of them becoming hooked on it.
Along those lines, I'm sorry, Bill, along those lines, do you have any barometer, since you've been doing this for so long, any barometer of how successful you've been in getting those young people to become theater goers as adults?
We have, I think unfortunately, we don't have people tallying this.
Right,
like, we're so busy writing press releases and rehearsing that we don't get to do the tallying, the data collecting that we want to have. But anecdotally, we have one actress who is performing in our shows now who saw our first production when she was in
that's
high
wonderful.
school.
That's great.
Just this past season, a young woman who had grown up seeing our shows with her schools asked her parents to celebrate her 19th birthday at the theater at one of our adult shows in the Sandbox series.
But that brings up an interesting question in the sense that you're bussing in thousands upon thousands of children every year.
20,000 a year.
Thanks to a grant from the school district, correct?
Partially, yes.
And once you expose them to your shows, some of them go, wow, this is great, I want to come back. But what I'm curious is, how does the community as a whole get those children to come back a second time and a third time? If they are brought in to you for free, which we should underline, this is free. They don't have to pay their any ticket fee. Their parents don't have to transport them. When it becomes their parents having to pay for the ticket and bring them to the theater, how does the community build a lifelong theater goer as opposed to someone who went, yeah, I remember about 25 years ago I saw this show when I was in 3rd grade.
I guess part of it is repetition. Part of it is the kids do come back with their parents, and they're not gonna, but the biggest part is they're not gonna come back if they don't come the first time. I think we have to accept that a certain amount of kids aren't gonna wanna come back, right? It's not for everyone.
Sure.
I don't go to football games as an adult, and I was dragged there as a kid, right? But if they're not exposed at all, they're not going to come. Like, there's this famous study that Lincoln Center did that we should all look up. They researched the people who came to their free events. You know how Lincoln Center in New York does a lot of free performances? And they found out it wasn't residents who live near Lincoln Center who come just because they live in the neighborhood and it's convenient. People came from further away, and it was people who'd grown up going to performances as kids. So that was the factor, what they were exposed to as children, not even geography.
Karen, I'm curious. As an actress, you've performed in theater for children?
Yes, I have.
Is there a difference?
Performing for children as opposed to adults?
For adults.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Yes and no. In any performance, an actor has to be honest. That's a basic requirement. But I found that with children, their barometer for honesty is so fine-tuned that that you really must be, I mean, as honest as possible, because they can sense fakeness or falseness, you know, sure, in the blink of an eye. It's just a built-in thing, you know. And I don't know what that is. Maybe it's just because they're not as jaded as we as adults are.
Sure.
But they sense when you're being honest, and they appreciate when they're not condescended to.
Sure.
That it's not didactic and, you know, you're beating them over the head with it.
But dramatically we can do that. We fool them. I spent a year in New York doing Children's Theater International. And International was just that. They had no idea that it was so educational. It was an extremely educational program for them. It was just wonderful.
Well, in fact, many of your shows, all of your shows, while there is a entertainment factor to it, am I correct? Most of your shows have a thematic underpinning that there's a lesson to learn, and it's not just be kind to the environment or something along those lines. You have life lessons that you're trying to weave in there. Is that accurate?
We're trying to bring in life lessons without being didactic. Mm-hmm. Take the audience on a journey with the characters. The characters are undergoing life lessons and life changes, but we don't want to come in and say, this is your lesson.
Right.
And it's not always a clear, neat ending with the lesson.
Which is good, because that's life.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's a question. How do you combat the technical age in which we live in, where I have nieces and nephews who, it's like, why would I come to the theater when I have my iPad or my Xbox or my, you know, I have all these wonderful digital toys right at my fingers. What is your argument? How do you battle that point of view?
I can quote a child.
Please.
He walked into his first production and he said, "Wow, this is 3D TV."
Oh,
wow. There you go.
I love it.
There you go.
Wow.
There we go, this generation.
Well, if those people who haven't seen one of her productions, you use sound, you have sometimes entire scores, musical scores of underscoring, and you use a lot of visual cues. Talk a little bit about that. This is not, again, a teddy bear in a
it's more
spotlight.
like Kinder Wagner.
I will now place a curse on you that will make you stop laughing forever. You are desperately in love with 3 oranges. 3 very particular oranges. You must journey across the world, over land and sea, across mountains and valleys, to the distant corners of the earth, looking for them. You will not rest until you possess them. Run, run, find them if you can.
Total theater. Total.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel it, even if it were a show for adults. That's how I feel theater. Like we get a little defensive, saying it's not children's theater, it's theater. It just happens that it's appropriate for kids and engaging for adults. We had a shooter from a local news station come do a story on a show and then come back with his wife and another couple for their anniversary.
Nice, nice.
And I think that this is the first culture to separate theater for kids and theater for adults. Like if you go to Indonesia and see the staging of the Barang and Randa and the Rangda, the Ramayana stories.
Perfect pronunciation.
Oh, Barang and Rangda, the Ramayana. It's generations of families watching this.
Right.
When I was in Bali, I was seeing little kids run around with pretend masks of the heroes from those stories, and they're not any different from the stories that their family, their parents and grandparents are going to see. So there has to be, ideally, I think, there's, of course, stories that should be told that aren't appropriate for younger children, or maybe even vice versa, but I love the possibility of a multi-generational, that's the new buzzword, multi-generational audience, where the parents aren't falling asleep. In fact, the parents are like, wow, my kids are so engaged, this is amazing, and so am I. It's delightful.
Do you do any with participation? I don't remember.
We definitely have
you get
moments.
The audience thoroughly involved.
Moments like trying to roar towards the half lion, half eagle up in the tree, roar until he loses his voice. Or offer jokes so that the goddess of laughter and merriment, the Sumerian goddess of laughter and merriment, when she laughs, she can't control where she flies. So the kids are telling jokes to make her leave, to make her start laughing so she can't control her flight, things like that.
It's definitely the sound, the sets, the costuming. Takes a lot of money. So you have support.
We have support from the community, yes.
From the community?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Is that grants we're talking
about? We
about?
have city grants, we have state grants, we have individual grants, we have corporate grants. We need more grants.
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
It is, and the more the community is supporting the work, the more they will feel engaged, and that's going to grow audiences too.
I have to tell you, what you just said now about it being multi-generational, I just love that. I consider myself enlightened now because I've always pigeonholed children's theater as just that. But I think it's really a wonderful way to look at it, where you, again, not only engage a young audience, but you engage their parents as well.
I don't want to be bored. I'm a parent of young kids. I don't want to be bored. I don't want my friends to be bored. I want my friends to look forward to come. I get excited when I see other moms and they're quoting the shows and they're saying, my kids are doing the Fata Morgana dance from Oranges on the beach. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And what's your next show? They want to go.
I think that's really important to note because, theater is magic, and it's not only magic for young people, it's magic for adults because inside all of us is a little kid, And I think, as adults in our everyday lives with trying to make ends meet and trying to be adults, that we lose that part of ourselves that remembers or responds to that magic. And I think that when adults go to theater for young audiences, it re-engages that inner child in some way.
And I like to think of it as two other metaphors. Pediatricians for the soul. Like, you don't say to pediatricians, oh, you're a kid's doctor, right? Oh, you do children's medicine. No, not at all. They're very important.
Right.
And also with food. Like, I get so upset when I see parents giving little kids frozen fish sticks and they're eating a really nice meal. When food is really good, kids like it. Like, our kids were eating kale salad in Hawaii because this was Kauai and it was fresh from the garden and the chef had massaged it with salad dressing. It was raw and they were eating it and they'd never eaten kale before. If it's really good and really nutritious and tasty,
well, tasty, that's the key
and
word
tasty,
right now.
Right.
Because I've got some nieces and nephew, if you say kale to them, they will run.
They haven't had the massaged kale before.
Stephanie was on my show before, too. I don't think I ever asked you what got you where you are today. Why this? What's your background?
Well, I studied theater as an undergrad, acting at Brown. I focused on acting, but I knew that I wanted to direct. So I did as many acting courses as I could, and I studied in London a little bit, and then I went to Boston, and I tried not to do theater. I did documentary production and television news production,
And that didn't work out?
I ended up doing theater, and then like on the side, doing improv comedy and acting, teaching kids theater on the side, and then I applied to Columbia only and got my MFA in directing at Columbia, and I actually took a class my first year in designing a theater company. And I worked with a theater management student, and he had worked in Seattle, and he knew of the children's theater company in Seattle, and he said, let's design a company in Miami for kids. So we designed the Playground Theater in Miami, creating world premieres of children's literature from around the world, but first class, not dumbing down. And I was like, that was a great project. We had to write a Schubert grant, an NEA grant, make a 5-year plan, design special events. It was with Barry Grove at Manhattan Theater Company.
Wow.
Sure.
Amazing.
Well, here's a question.
But I didn't know I was going to do it until 5 years later.
That's my question. Did that project, I don't want to say dictate, but did that set you down that path? Or
no. No. It just was, I think 5 years later, after I'd graduated from Columbia and I'd been working in New York, and then I got pregnant, and my husband at the time and I thought, well, let's look into doing that project. And we came to Miami, where my family still was, and interviewed people in the government, in the arts, in education, and they all said, it's going to be really hard, but we need it, you should do it. And then 7 years later, it felt like, well, we want to expand now, because we're doing theater for young audiences, but A, people aren't getting it, that it's multi-generational theater, not Fuzzy Animal in the Flat.
Right.
And we have these 2 spaces that are empty after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we want more artists in here. So we kind of did the reverse expansion.
Right.
A lot of theaters go from adult theater to inviting kids in, and we went from focusing on younger audiences to inviting adults in.
How did that transition go? Was it a difficult transition, or was it as smooth as everything else?
Amazing. I mean, nothing's smooth, but it's amazing. It's definitely expanded our professional family and our audience family. It brought in a partnership with O Cinema, so now we're also screening movies when we don't have plays on the stage. It brought Mad Cat into our studio, into the Sandbox.
Oh, yeah,
so
sure. So glad.
It's creating a lot more interaction. And it also brought actors who hadn't auditioned yet. Like, actors came to audition for Three Sisters who wouldn't have auditioned for another show, and then realized what we were doing and continued on for some of the multi-generational.
We should explain that Three Sisters was MTC's first adult production that you did several months ago. And it was certainly, while students could come, it was not aimed at a 5th grader or 4th or 1st grader.
No, we brought in high school students during the week, which was really interesting.
But that's the other thing, that you brought those high schoolers in. You've talked before, and I'd like you to expand on the concept. You mentioned this to me a few weeks ago about the idea of a continuum of care, that if you have a foster child, there's a continuum of care that goes all the way into early young adulthood. And that you wanted to apply, or you thought in the best of all possible worlds, that should be applied to building a theater habit, from kids coming to the Red Thread, to classes, to building into young adulthood a theater component. Could you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, I have to credit the Peacock Foundation, the director of the Peacock Foundation, for that metaphor, because we went to her scared, will people still give us money if we're not only serving kids? And she said, no, I get it. This is like the continuum of foster care. You don't want to have to drop your audience just because they hit 16 or 18. This makes sense to me. So it's a destination. It's still a destination for theater lovers of any age, either as an audience or a participant, or both. Do a little of both.
That's great.
I do think that a child wants to go to the theater if they have had the opportunity to perform in the theater. So I'm hoping that the schools today do encourage continuous
I'll tell you
plays for
something
children.
else. Something else that helps is we send teaching artists into the schools, and the kids get excited to see those actors on stage. Or they go to summer camp with the teachers, and then they get to see them on stage. Or we like to cast the same actors over and over to get a continuum of work, of vocabulary together, and the kids love to stand outside. I saw that play, I saw that play, and then on stage I saw him in that play, I saw her in that play. They love to have that relationship.
Sure.
Is there anything that you do, or any theater that focuses on young audiences that tries to encourage minority kids to take ownership of theater, and encourage them to be theater goers?
Well, most of our audience is minority. Most of the kids are from Title I schools, most are minority, so that's most of the audience.
But they're being bused there. You're talking about getting them to educate their mothers and their fathers, their parents, to take them
so
to
that
the
they will
productions.
become theater goers in the future.
Here's a great project that's happening through the Parent Academy in the Dade County Public School System. They send out, I guess they do it by email now, invitations to parents to bring their families to the theater, to different cultural events, because these parents actually get graded. It's like How to Be a Better Parent program. Sorry if I'm paraphrasing terribly.
Wow.
But 4 generations of a family will show up at the theater that have never been to the theater, and it's because the school invited them. They have a bridge from something they know to something they don't know. They've never been to the theater, they've never been to our neighborhood, they don't know where to park, they might not know the language, but the Parent Academy ushers them through all the steps. And then once people come, they come, either they come again or they don't come again, but they're not going to come again if they don't come the first time.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
Tell me what does success look like when you've got to show up and you've got an audience out there of 3rd graders and 4th graders? When do you know when the show is landing? When do you know you've achieved what it is that you're looking forward to?
You were there that day when the audience rushed onto the stage. It was a kinder rave. It was crazy. It was the end of The Love of 3 Oranges, and it was the 3rd time we'd done the show, but we get the luxury of tweaking it every time we do it too, and sometimes it's new actors, and there's always something fresh, but this had never happened. These oranges drop from a net onto the stage when the actors are bowing. All these oranges drop down, and the kids ran onto the stage, and the stagehands had to come out, and everyone was freaking out, and I was there smiling like, this is a really good problem to have. They rushed the stage. That happened a few more times in that run. So that just felt like, it wasn't like, oh, they woke up and ran on the stage. No, that meant they were collecting that energy for 90 minutes, and then they needed a release.
Yeah.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Well, we are coming near the end of our time. Is there something about children's theater that you think the general public out there doesn't understand?
Yeah,
You've got
cut the children. Cut the children. It's good if it's good theater. If it says children, it's probably not so good.
Fair enough. All right. We want to thank Stephanie Ansin.
Thank you.
The founder and artistic director of Miami Theater Center, or MTC, in Miami Shores, and the Playground Theater, which is, I guess, part of it, or not part of it. It's been subsumed into it, correct?
Roots.
It's the Roots. And we want to thank all of you for coming in and watching us. We want to encourage everybody to please go to as much theater, local theater, as humanly possible. And if you want to know what theater is on, you can always go to our website, floridatheateronstage.com. Thank you.